Welcome back to today's video. Today is Friday, January 31st, 2025, and today we are going to be talking about the Democratic National Committee election set to take place tomorrow, February 1st, 2025, an election that we will know the results of by the end of the day that will tell us who is leading the Democratic Party through the next 4 years, potentially even longer, and who will be the main person helping rebuild state and local parties as well as the national party as they reflect on this loss to Donald Trump a second time in this new administration. Now, a new endorsement today coming from Hakeem Jeffries for Ben Wickler, the Wisconsin Democratic Party chair, is massive news. We've seen endorsements all across the country for different candidates here, Martin O'Malley, Ken Martin, and Ben Wickler. But today, this pretty much puts it into absolute terms that Ben Wickler is now the favorite to win the DNC chair race, alongside the fact that, taking aside everything else, on the status of endorsements, it has been roughly even set across the playing field here, but now Ben Wickler has the upper hand when it comes down to pure endorsements for this race. Now, this isn't to say that anyone should write out Ken Martin and to a lesser extent Martin O'Malley. This race still is at a point where there is no clear majority of voting members in the DNC who have chosen a specific candidate, which means in theory, Ken Martin or Martin O'Malley can beat out Ben Wickler. But when it comes down to late-stage momentum and what we've started to see building up on the Democratic Party side, it's clear the Wisconsin Democratic Party chair, at least as it stands right now, likely is the best or most favorited option when it comes down to this race. Now, the 2025 race has a number of candidates besides the three I have mentioned, but those are by far the three finalists that we can really consider for this race. For a bit of history, and we talked about this a bit more 2 days ago, and I won't spend and waste your time talking about it, the quick rundown is in 2021 it was uncontested, in 2017 it was a Hillary versus Bernie type of election. Ultimately, Tom Perez, who represented the interests of Joe Biden and Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, won that race against Keith Ellison, who had received the endorsements of people like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren in that more progressive wing of the Democratic Party. 4 years later, because the Democratic Party already had a clear leader, that being Joe Biden in the Oval Office, Democrats had the majority in the Senate, Democrats had the majority in the House. It was a trifecta. The chairman elections went with the way that President Biden wanted them to go, as he was pursued or viewed as the leader of the party. Now, with no clear leader of the party, this race is contested. Now, the most recent leader of the party is Vice President Kamala Harris, who led the Democratic Party into the 2024 election after President Biden dropped out of the race on July 21st, 2024. Now, Kamala Harris ended up losing the election to Donald Trump, having his second term. A lot of Democrats looking back on this election and saying what exactly went wrong, but that isn't exactly shying away these DNC contenders from speaking with the former vice president. Eugene Daniels here from Politico reports that VP Harris reportedly spoke with the DNC chair candidates, Ken Martin, Ben Wickler, and Martin O'Malley, again further speaking to their three finalist status. Although it is not, in explicit terms, they are the three finalists, ultimately that is the case. She spoke with them for about 15 to 20 minutes each, and she told them she expects, quote, to work closely with the winning candidate as soon as they are elected. Something Kamala Harris has been making very clear to the media and to the press and to even her own advisors and other fellow Democrats is that she will not go quietly into the night. We'll talk about this briefly in a video tomorrow, I guess, updating everyone more about what Kamala Harris is doing. She was seen at the Los Angeles Fire Aid concert. So really, we have seen Kamala Harris much more in the spotlight than Hillary Clinton was after her election loss, or than what we typically see amongst former presidential candidates, which sort of indicates that maybe Kamala Harris isn't at the end of her political career just yet. But again, reporting on this really goes to show that these three candidates are, the real deal. They are the people that the Democrats are looking to as the viable or most viable candidates here. But like I said, this endorsement from Hakeem Jeffries, combined with the endorsement from Nancy Pelosi, it's clear that the Democratic establishment has been now falling in line behind Ben Wickler far more than Ken Martin, at least so it seems from the list of endorsements. Now, don't get me wrong. Ken Martin has been serving a longer time, and for many people before this race began was perceived as the establishment candidate. Many people, including Tim Walz, had endorsed him, and the expectation here was that because of his close association with many members of the South, many members across the country, that he was going to win this race, especially given that Minnesota, not necessarily from an electoral standpoint being, the same as Wisconsin, though Minnesota is a bluer state. The argument more so here is about the legislative accomplishments that Ken Martin and those in the Democratic Party and the DFL in Minnesota, that recruited good candidates in the state Senate races, in the state House races, that won the governorship, that won numerous races that allowed such significant progress, versus Wisconsin, which has been largely halted by gerrymandering that has helped the Republican Party in a number of state legislative races. Regardless, though, Ken Martin here, when it comes down to endorsements, does have a lot of big names, right? People like Amy Klobuchar, people like Tim Walz. However, Ben Wickler certainly has been outpacing him. So when it comes down to who Ben Wickler has, been endorsed by for the DNC chair race, what do we have? I'm not going to go ahead and talk about former U.S. secretaries, but I am going to talk about incumbent senators. You have Dick Durbin, who holds a lot of weight amongst the Senate Democrats, but Chuck Schumer, who holds even more weight. When it comes down to U.S. representatives, Nancy Pelosi, and now Hakeem Jeffries, who is the minority leader in the House of Representatives, that's a big deal. That is a huge deal for Ben Wickler in this race. So U.S. representatives who have been endorsing, I guess Wikipedia hasn't updated yet, but either way, right, who is he being endorsed by? Other state party chairs, a number of them, right? 183 DNC members to date. Now, Ken Martin says that he has 200 DNC members. I'm interested to see because based on these numbers here, what do we have? 137, roughly 180, and then 200. That's more than the total number that are voting in the DNC. So somebody's not telling the full truth here. Regardless, though, these numbers are pretty comparable between Wickler and Martin. And when it comes down to big names, again, take a look at this. The list of governors goes on and on. Gretchen Whitmer, Maura Healey, Kathy Hochul, Laura Kelly, Andy Beshear, Tony Evers, big names in the Democratic Party. Then again, when it comes down to bigger names amongst the mainstream media for Democrats here, Stacey Abrams, right? Lesser known, but still very relevant, party chairs, North Carolina party chair, Anderson Clayton, who is running for re-election right now. Her election's in a few weeks, actually. But again, all these people are now jumping on to Ben Wickler, and now so is Hakeem Jeffries. And so I think this is a really big move because it speaks to now there is a combined consensus here from the House Democrats, from the Senate Democrats, that they are backing they are backing Ben Wickler. I almost said Ken Martin there. And I think that does sway a lot because these endorsements show that it is these Democrats who say, I think this person is the most competent to lead the party. It also speaks to a working relationship that they might have had with these candidates before. And I think it does a huge service to the candidates to receive these endorsements because it isn't a primary, right? It's not as if South Carolina is going to vote and then, Iowa's going to vote and then New Hampshire's going to vote. That's not how the DNC chair elections work. For most purposes, these are deep state Democrats who have been ingrained in party institutions for years. And the people that they listen to and the people that they look up to and the people that they trust in the party are often those who are as well in the party elite. Think Nancy Pelosi. Think Joe Biden, right? Think Hakeem Jeffries. Think these names that have been major parts of the Democratic Party brand for decades on end, or have recent for Hakeem Jeffries, good example of a recent Democrat who, got into politics in the past 2 decades, has made a major name for himself in the past decade, now is getting bigger and bigger into name ID, into TV personality, but his endorsements matter too. Nancy Pelosi's endorsement matters too. And I'm not trying to downplay the Ken Martin, Tim Walz endorsement, but I am going to say, when it comes down to this more deep state style of voting, those who are more ingrained in party institutions, they will likely listen to Jeffries and Pelosi over somebody like Tim Walz. And I think overall here, what we are finding is that there is a building out consensus amongst many of these very powerful Democrats in a bunch of different ranking, positions, very prominent governors, some running for, 2028. So all across the board here, the DNC chair election, it looks like Ben Wickler now has the upper hand, as well as the fact he has the institutional backing from a lot of these mainstream Democrats. And so if Wickler is chosen for the DNC position, he will be responsible for leading the entire nation in the way that the Democratic Party of Wisconsin led in 2024. And you might be thinking, okay, if Trump won Wisconsin in 2024, does this mean that Ben Wickler is a bad party chair? Well, besides 2024, there's only 1 or 2 real races that Wickler has lost as Democratic Party chair since taking office: state treasurer and the Senate race in 2022. They've won numerous governor races and Senate races and House races all across the state, as well as the 2020 presidential. But either way, Wisconsin was actually the most impressive swing state for Kamala Harris, even though she lost the state. Of the 7 we analyzed throughout the election, she lost all of them. But the margins at which she lost them by were much more excessive in states not named Wisconsin. Neighboring Michigan was decided by 1.4%. Pennsylvania was decided by 1.6%. Georgia was decided by a margin, or actually not 1.6% here, 1.7%. Georgia was decided by a margin of roughly 2 points. Arizona by roughly 6 points. Nevada by roughly 4 points. Wisconsin, however, was decided by 0.9%. It was a close race, and Democrats fought hard for it. But it was the least amount of swing out of any of the states, including Minnesota, where his biggest competition, Ken Martin, is from, which is a state that voted for Kamala Harris, but was a state that Biden won by 7, but it was Wisconsin that only swung by 1.5%. And it was that minimizing of the swinging that allowed Democrats to hold on to their Senate race in the state of Wisconsin. After all, Tammy Baldwin won by just under a point. Had the state swung in a way such as similar to Minnesota did, the state of Wisconsin would have a Republican senator today from this seat. 2 Republican senators. Luckily for Democrats, they have just one. And a lot of Democrats thank Ben Wickler for that. So when I see these endorsements, it looks like the race is starting to come to a close. While it will be very contested and we could very much end up with a Ken Martin and to a lesser extent Martin O'Malley victory tomorrow, it looks like Wickler is the favorite to win this race. It's not a done deal, and things can change. There's a lot that can happen and a lot that will happen. I'm sure these voting members will be staying up late tonight at the Gaylord. The election is being held in Maryland. Go Maryland, right? My home state. Either way, though, we will know tomorrow. A lot can change between now and then, but these endorsements are getting pretty big. And it's very interesting to see how in the 2025 race, this race really does matter. The rebuilding of the Democratic Party really does matter. And I'm interested to see where they go from here, because as of right now, it seems like it's a toss-up with one candidate leaned in favor. And I'll be very interested to see any of the changes that they make on day one, should they be elected. Wickler, Martin, or O'Malley, all of them have slightly different but similar visions for the Democratic Party. Very fascinating to see how they decide to go about it. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the top left of the screen, bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2024 post-election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.